The cold darkness of space had been her only companion for 12,000 years. Valithra moved slowly through the void between stars, her massive body cutting through the empty, nothing like a ship without a destination. Her scales, once bright with the light of 100 suns, had grown dull over the centuries. Her wings, which could stretch wide enough to catch the solar winds of dying stars, now folded close against her body. She had no reason to fly fast anymore. She had nowhere to go. She was a Dracane. Her people had been old when the first galaxies were young. They had watched stars being born from clouds of dust and gas. They had seen civilizations rise and fall across 1,000,000 worlds. They had carried entire species across the universe on their backs, helping them find new homes when their own planets died. The Dracane were guardians once. They were teachers. They were friends to countless beings across the cosmos. But that was long ago. So long ago that Valithra sometimes wondered if it had ever been real at all. She was the last one now. The final Dracane in all of existence. Her brothers and sisters had all faded away, one by one, over the long centuries. They had not died from war or disease or the natural end of their long lives. They had simply stopped wanting to exist. The loneliness had taken them, as slowly and surely as a star cooling into darkness. Valithra understood why. She felt it every moment of every endless day. The terrible weight of being completely and utterly alone. Her kind spoke differently than other beings. The Dracane did not use words or sounds or symbols. They communicated through feeling itself. When a Dracane wanted to say something, they would send out waves of pure emotion. Joy felt like warm light spreading through the soul. Sadness felt like rain falling on an empty plain. Love felt like being held by the universe itself. This was how her people had talked to each other for billions of years. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was also why she was alone. No other species in the universe could hear her. She had tried so many times to speak to others. When she met the Velith, beings made of living crystal who sang mathematical songs to each other, she had reached out with all her heart. She had sent them waves of greeting, of hope, of desperate desire for connection. They had looked at her with their faceted eyes and seen nothing but a large animal drifting through space. They could not feel her words. They could not know she was trying to speak. Viscari were next. A species connected through a shared mind. Millions of individuals thinking as one. Surely they would understand, she had thought. Surely a species that knew what it meant to be connected would be able to feel her reaching out. But no. The Skari had studied her like a curiosity, taken samples of her scales, and moved on. They never knew she had been screaming hello the entire time. There were others after that. So many others. The energy beings who lived in nebula clouds. The machine intelligences that had outlived their creators. The ancient races who had seen almost as much as she had. None of them could hear her. None of them could feel the words she tried so hard to share. After a few thousand years, Valithra stopped trying. Hope was too painful when it always ended in disappointment. She drifted now through a region of space that a young species called the Vega system. She had passed through here before, many times. It was quiet. There were asteroids to hide among, places where she could rest and try to forget how empty existence had become. But something was different this time. There were ships here now. Small things barely larger than her smallest claw. They moved with the clumsy energy of a species that had only recently learned to travel between stars. Valithra watched them with tired eyes. She had seen this before too. Young civilizations full of excitement and curiosity spreading out into the galaxy for the first time. They would grow and change, and eventually either destroy themselves or become something older and colder and more distant from feeling. She did not approach them. What was the point? They would not understand her any more than the others had. They would scan her and study her, and maybe try to communicate with their primitive radio waves and light signals. And when she could not respond in a way they recognized, they would move on. They always moved on, but still she watched them. She could not help it. Even after all this time, some small part of her still wanted to believe that somewhere out there was someone who could hear her. It was foolish. She knew it was foolish. But loneliness does strange things to even the oldest souls. The ships were crewed by beings that called themselves humans. Valithra had never encountered them before. They were soft and small and fragile. Their lives were so short that to her they seemed to flicker in and out of existence like sparks from a fire. And yet they built ships and crossed the void and reached for the stars with hands that would turn to dust in what felt to her like moments. There was something about them that caught her attention. Something in the way they moved, the way they interacted with each other. Even from a distance, she could see that they touched each other often. They laughed. They argued. They hugged and cried and lived with an intensity that seemed almost wasteful for creatures with so little time. She watched one of their ships for a long while. It was a small vessel, clearly meant for exploration rather than war. The beings inside were studying the asteroids, collecting samples, mapping the stars. Normal things. Boring things. But then one of them looked out a window. And for just a moment, Valithra felt like that human was looking directly at her. Not at a strange alien creature. Not at a scientific curiosity. At her, she felt something stir in her chest. Something she had not felt in a very long time. Thought it was probably nothing. It was always nothing. In a few days, the humans would leave like all the others, and she would be alone again in the endless dark. But still, that look, those eyes, for the first time in centuries, Valithra did not turn away. She stayed and watched and waited. She did not know what she was waiting for. She only knew that the feeling in her chest would not let her leave. Not yet. Not until she was sure that this time would end like all the others. She hoped it would not. She feared it would. And in that space between hope and fear, the ancient dragon waited for the universe to answer a question she had stopped asking long ago. Was there anyone out there who could truly see her? Kevin Marsh was tired. He had been flying the research vessel Wanderer's Life for 3 weeks straight, and the asteroid field around Vega was not making his job any easier. Rocks the size of buildings floated everywhere, and each one needed to be avoided with careful attention. He was good at his job, but even the best pilot gets exhausted. He was about to ask for a coffee break when his sensors started, screaming at him that something massive was moving through the asteroid field. Something alive. Kevin's hands froze on the controls. He had been a pilot for 15 years. He had seen strange things in space, but his instruments were telling him that there was a living creature out there that was almost a kilometer long. That was impossible. Nothing alive could be that big. Nothing. He called the rest of the crew. To the bridge. Dr. Lily Okonkwo was the first to arrive. She was the ship's xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and skin the color of dark coffee. She had spent her whole career hoping to find intelligent alien life. Now she stood in front of the main screen, and her mouth hung open in shock. The creature was beautiful. It had scales that caught the distant starlight and turned it into rainbows. It had wings that stretched out like the sails of an ancient ship. Its body curved and coiled through space with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. It had 4 legs, each ending in claws that could have crushed their ship like a toy. And its eyes, enormous and golden, held a depth of intelligence that made Lily's heart pound. Marcus Hall, the ship's engineer, stood beside her. He was a practical man who did not believe in fairy tales, but even he could not deny what he was seeing. "It's a dragon," he said softly. A real dragon. Commander Sophie Vance pushed her way to the front of the group. She was a short woman with gray hair and a face that had seen too many hard decisions. She had been in charge of research missions for 20 years, and she knew that what happened in the next few minutes could change everything. "First contact protocols," she said firmly. "Nobody does anything stupid. We observe. We record. We do not engage unless engaged. Clear?" Everyone nodded. But Lily could not take her eyes off the creature, because she had noticed something that the others had not. The dragon's energy readings were not random. They pulsed and flowed in patterns, rhythms, almost like speech. "Commander," Lily said quietly, "I think she's trying to talk to us." Sophie looked at her sharply. "Explain." Lily pointed at her instruments. "Look at these readings. The energy coming from her body is structured. It has patterns that repeat and vary. That's not just biology. That's communication." For the next 3 days, they tried everything they could think of. Kevin sent radio messages on every frequency. Marcus flashed lights in mathematical sequences. Sophie herself recorded greetings in a dozen human languages and broadcast them. Into space. The dragon responded to none of it. She just watched them. Those enormous golden eyes tracked their every movement. Sometimes she would drift closer, and the whole crew would hold their breath. Sometimes she would pull back, and Lily felt a strange sense of loss, as if something precious was slipping away. On the second night, Lily stayed at the observation window long after everyone else had gone to sleep. The dragon was there, floating in the darkness, her scales catching the faint light of distant stars. She was so still that she might have been a statue, but Lily saw her eyes. And in those eyes, she saw something that broke her heart: loneliness, deep and old and heavy as the weight of 1,000 years. The dragon was not just watching them. She was hoping. And that hope was mixed with so much pain that Lily found tears running down her cheeks without knowing why. "Who are you?" Lily whispered to the glass. "What happened to you?" The dragon did not answer. Of course she did not answer. She could not hear words. She could not understand light signals. Whatever language she spoke, it was nothing humans had ever encountered before. On the third day, Commander Vance made a decision. "We can't stay here forever," she said at the morning meeting. "We have a mission to complete. Other systems to survey. We've recorded everything we can. It's time to move on." Lily wanted to argue. She wanted to scream that they were making a mistake, that this creature was trying to reach them, that leaving now would be abandoning something important. But she was just a scientist on a research vessel. She did not make the decisions. The Wanderers. Light fired its engines and began to pull. Away from the asteroid field. Lily watched from the observation deck as the dragon grew smaller and smaller in the distance. And just before they jumped to faster than light speed, she saw the creature's wings unfold. Saw her rise up as if to follow. Saw her fall back as the ship vanished into the void. The dragon was alone again, but Lily made a promise to herself in that moment. She did not know how, and she did not know when, but she would find a way to go back. She would find a way to speak to that ancient, lonely creature. She would find a way to say what she had seen in those golden eyes. "You are not alone. I see you, and I will find a way to reach you." The journey back to human space took 4 months. During that time, Lily barely slept. She studied every recording they had made. She analyzed every pattern in the dragon's energy readings. She filled notebooks with theories and equations and desperate guesses. Everyone thought she was obsessed. Everyone thought she was wasting her time. The dragon was a curiosity, nothing more. A strange animal in a distant corner of space. But Lily knew better. She had seen those eyes. She'd have felt that loneliness, even through the cold glass of a spaceship window. The dragon was not an animal. She was a person who had been trying to speak for who knew how long. A person who had been ignored and misunderstood and left behind by everyone she had ever met. Lily was going to change that, no matter what it took. When the ship finally docked at the research station called Horizon's Edge, Lily walked off with her notebooks under her arm and a fire in her eyes that made even Commander Vance step out of her way. The real work was about to begin. The research station Horizon's Edge floated in orbit around a small moon. It was not a large station, but it had good laboratories and better coffee. Lily had called it home for the past 8 months, and in that time she had barely left her workspace. Her colleagues thought she had lost her mind. Perhaps she had, but she could not forget those golden eyes. She could not forget the loneliness she had seen there. And she could not accept that the dragon would spend eternity without anyone to hear her voice. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday, at 3 in the morning, when most sensible people were asleep. Lily had brought in 2 specialists to help her. The first was Nathan Cross, a neuroscientist who studied how human brains process emotions. He was a thin man with messy hair and glasses that were always falling down his nose. The second was Claire Dunn, a musician and acoustic engineer who had spent 20 years studying how sound affects the human mind. She was older than the others, with silver streaks in her dark hair and a smile that made everyone feel calm. They had been working together for months, trying to understand the strange energy patterns the dragon produced. Tonight, Claire was running the recordings through a new kind of analysis. She had converted the energy waves into something her music equipment could understand, and when she played the results through her speakers, all 3 of them went very still. It was not sound. Exactly. The human ear could not hear it directly, but Claire's equipment could translate it into something almost like music. Layers upon layers of tone and rhythm and harmony. Beautiful, complex, and somehow impossibly sad. "This is not random," Claire said slowly. "This is structured, intentional. She is singing, Lily, but the song is not made of notes. It is made of something else." Nathan leaned forward, his eyes bright behind his glasses. "The patterns match emotional processing signatures in the human brain. Joy, grief, hope, fear. She is not just making noise. She's broadcasting feelings. Pure emotional states, turned into energy and sent out into space." Lily felt her heart beating fast. So she communicates through emotion itself. Not words, not symbols, just direct transfer of feeling. "That would explain why no one has ever understood her," Nathan said. "Most species optimize away from emotion as they advance. Logic is more efficient. Feeling is messy, unpredictable, hard to control. Advanced civilizations tend to suppress or eliminate strong emotional responses. But humans never did that," Claire said quietly. "We still cry at sad movies. We still laugh until we cannot breathe. We still fall in love even when it makes no sense." "Exactly." Nathan stood up and began pacing around the room. "Humans are one of the most emotionally intense species in the known galaxy. Other races think we are primitive because of it. They say we are controlled by our feelings, that we cannot be trusted to make rational decisions. But what if that emotional intensity is not a weakness? What if it is exactly what the dragon needs?" Lily understood then. The dragon spoke through feeling, and humans felt more deeply, more wildly, more completely than almost any other species. If anyone could learn to hear her, it would be them. But there was a problem. Even humans could not naturally perceive the frequencies the dragon used. They needed some way to translate their own emotions into energy she could receive. They needed to build a bridge. It took 2 years. 2 years of failed experiments and dead ends and moments when Lily wanted to give up. 2 years of begging for funding and fighting with administrators who thought she was chasing fairy tales. 2 years of nights spent staring at equations until the numbers blurred together. But finally, they built it. They called it the resonance amplifier. It was a simple thing, really. A neural interface that connected to the emotional centers of the human brain. Sensors that could read the user's feelings. Transmitters that could convert those feelings into the same kind of energy the dragon produced. It would let a human send emotions out into space, the same way the dragon did. The first tests were strange. Claire would put on the interface and think about something happy. A joy would pulse out from the device in waves that the instruments could detect. Nathan would feel sad, and the sadness would broadcast across the laboratory like ripples in a pond. It worked. It actually worked. Lily knew what she had to do next. She had to go back to Vega. She had to find the dragon again. And she had to try to speak. When she asked Commander Vance for permission to take the Wanderer's light back to the asteroid field, the answer was no. The mission was too risky. The chance of success was too low. The resources could be better used elsewhere. So Lily took the ship anyway. She waited until Vance was off the station for a conference. She convinced Kevin and Marcus to help her by showing them the recordings, by letting them hear the dragon's song translated through Claire's speakers. They agreed before she had finished her explanation. "That sound," Kevin said softly. "I have never heard anything so beautiful. Or so sad." They launched at midnight while the station slept. By the time anyone noticed the ship was gone, they were already 3 days out. Lily sat in the cargo bay, the resonance amplifier on her head, practicing. She thought about her childhood, running through fields with her sisters. She thought about her mother's laugh. She thought about the moment she had first seen the dragon, that feeling of wonder and fear and desperate hope all mixed together. The machine hummed. Her emotions became energy. And somewhere ahead, in the darkness of space, an ancient being waited without knowing that someone was finally coming to answer her call. Lily was not a soldier. She was not a hero. She was just a scientist who had seen loneliness in a stranger's eyes and decided she could not walk away. And sometimes, that is enough. Valithra felt the ship long before she saw it. A small thing, moving through the darkness toward the asteroid field she called home. She recognized its shape. It was the same vessel that had visited before, the one with the human who had stared at her through the window with such strange intensity that she did not understand why they had come back. In 12,000 years, no one had ever returned. Species came, they studied her like an interesting rock, and they left. That was the pattern. That was always the pattern. But this ship was different. There was something on board that made her old heart tremble. A feeling was reaching toward her. Through the void. At first, she thought she was imagining it. She had been alone so long that her mind sometimes played tricks on her. She would think she heard voices in the solar wind, or felt the touch of another Dracane in the warmth of a distant star. It was never real. It was always just the desperate hope of a creature who had forgotten what real connection felt like. But this was different. This was not a ghost or a memory or a dream. This was actual emotion, broadcast on a frequency she recognized. It was weak and clumsy and obviously artificial. But it was there. It was real, and it was saying something she had not heard in 12,000 years. Loneliness. Someone was sending loneliness toward her. Not the word, not a symbol, but the actual feeling itself. The weight of empty rooms and silent nights. The ache of wanting someone to understand and knowing they never would. The quiet despair of being surrounded by beings who could not see the real you. Valithra knew that feeling. She knew it better than anything else in the universe. And someone somehow was sharing it with her. She moved toward the ship without thinking. Her wings unfolded for the first time in centuries, catching currents of radiation and pushing her forward through the asteroid field. She moved carefully, so carefully, afraid that if she went too fast, she would scare away whoever was reaching out to her. The emotion changed as she got closer. The loneliness was still there, but now there was something else underneath it. Something small and fragile and so beautiful it made her eyes burn with tears. She had not cried in millennia. Hope. Inside the Wanderer's light. Lily Okonkwo sat in the cargo bay with the resonance amplifier pressed against her temples. Her eyes were closed. Her hands were shaking. She was thinking about her grandmother, who had died when Lily was 17. She was thinking about how it felt to lose someone you loved. She was thinking about all the nights she had spent alone in her laboratory, wondering if she was wasting her life on an impossible dream. And beneath all of that, she was thinking about the dragon, about those golden eyes, about the sadness she had seen there, sadness that had haunted her for 2 years. She was thinking about how much she wanted to reach across the void and tell this ancient creature that she was not alone, that someone had finally learned to hear her, that the silence was over at last. The ship's sensors lit up with warnings. Energy levels were spiking all around them. Kevin gripped the controls, ready to fly them out of danger. But Lily's voice came over the intercom, calm and clear. Do not run. She is not attacking. She is answering. Valithra did not know how to be gentle anymore. She had not spoken to another being in so long that she had forgotten how to control the force of her emotions. When she responded to the tiny human signal, she did so with everything she had. Joy burst out of her like a supernova. 12,000 years of loneliness cracked and broke and fell away. 12,000 years of believing she would die unheard, unknown, unloved. And now this impossible gift. This tiny ship with its fragile crew and its clumsy technology and its beautiful, beautiful heart. The energy wave hit the Wanderer's light like a physical force. Systems flickered and sparked. Marcus cursed and dove for the engineering panels, trying to keep everything running. But Lily just sat in the cargo bay, tears streaming down her face, as feelings not her own flooded through the interface. She felt what the dragon felt. She felt the loneliness, so deep and vast it was like drowning in an ocean with no shore. She felt the loss of everyone Valithra had ever known. She felt the slow death of hope over thousands of empty years. And she felt the moment when hope came back to life, sudden and fierce and overwhelming. Lily sent back the only thing she could. A simple emotion, as strong as she could make it. You are not alone. I see you. I hear you. And I am here. Valithra sang. For the first time in 12,000 years, she opened her mouth and let her voice ring out through space. It was not a sound that human ears could hear. It was a wave of pure emotion, carrying gratitude and wonder and a joy so intense it made the stars themselves seem dim. Lily sang back. Her voice was not as strong. Her song was clumsy and unpracticed. But it was enough. It was more than enough. Because it was real and it was true. And it came from a heart that refused to leave anyone alone in the darkness. Kevin and Marcus watched through the window as the dragon danced among the asteroids. Her wings spread wide, catching light and turning it into rainbows. Her body twisted and curved in patterns of celebration. She moved like a creature reborn, like someone who had just remembered what it meant to be alive. She's happy, Marcus said softly. She's actually happy. Kevin nodded. He did not trust himself to speak. There was something in his throat that might have been tears. In the cargo bay, Lily kept singing. She told the dragon about Earth, about oceans and mountains and fields of green grass. She told her about human music, about symphonies and jazz and the simple songs mothers sing to their children. She told her about love and loss and the strange, stubborn hope that makes humans keep reaching for things they cannot have. And the dragon listened. For the first time in her long, long life, she was not alone. Someone was talking to her. Someone was seeing her. Someone cared. When Lily finally took off the interface, exhausted and shaking, she found that 6 hours had passed. 6 hours of conversation without a single word. 6 hours of two souls meeting across the impossible gulf between species. It was only the beginning. But it was enough. It was more than enough. The news spread through human space like fire through dry grass. A scientist had made contact with an ancient alien being. Not through radio signals or mathematical codes, but through emotion itself. The story was too strange to believe and too beautiful to ignore. Lily Okonkwo became famous overnight. Reporters wanted to interview her. Scientists wanted to study her methods. Politicians wanted to claim her discovery for their own purposes. But Lily did not care about any of that. She only cared about the dragon waiting for her in the asteroid field of Vega system. She named her Valithra, because that was the feeling the dragon had sent when Lily asked who she was. It was not really a name in the human sense. It was more like a signature of being, a unique pattern of emotion that belonged only to her. But Valithra was as close as human language could come. The Galactic Council sent warnings within weeks of the news reaching them. They were a coalition of older species, races that had traveled between stars for millions of years. They spoke with the authority of beings who believed they understood everything worth understanding. The Dracane are dangerous, they said. They are unpredictable and emotional, and not to be trusted. Leave the creature alone. Do not make contact again. This is for your own good. Lily ignored them. She had learned things about Valithra that the Council did not know. The Dracane had not died out from some external threat. They had faded away because they believed connection was impossible. Each one had spent thousands of years trying to find someone who could hear them, and each one had eventually given up. The loneliness had not killed them directly. The despair had. Humans would never make that mistake. Humans formed bonds across every barrier the universe could throw at them. They adopted children from other species. They made friends with creatures that could kill them with a single bite. They fell in love with artificial intelligences, with aliens, with being so different from themselves that other races could not understand how connection was possible. But humans understood. Connection was not about similarity. It was about choice. The choice to reach out. The choice to care. The choice to keep trying even when success seemed impossible. More people began making the journey to Vega. Not scientists or diplomats, but ordinary humans who had heard Valithra's story and felt something stir in their hearts. Nathan and Claire built more resonance amplifiers. They trained volunteers how to use them. And one by one, new voices joined the conversation. Tyler Brooks was a retired teacher from a small colony world. He had lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier, and the grief had nearly destroyed him. When he put on the interface and reached out to Valithra, he sent her his sorrow, and she sent back understanding. She knew what it meant to lose everyone you loved. She knew the weight of missing someone who would never return. They talked for hours, the old man and the ancient dragon. When Tyler finally took off the interface, his face was wet with tears, but his eyes were clear. She told me that grief is not the end, he said to Lily afterward. She told me that love does not disappear just because the person is gone. She's been carrying love for her entire species for 12,000 years. And she is still here, still hoping, still believing that connection matters. Maya Santos was next. She was only 17 years old, a girl from a mining colony where she had grown up isolated and alone. She had never fit in with the other children. She had always felt like there was something wrong with her, some piece missing that everyone else seemed to have. When she touched Valithra's mind, she found someone who understood that feeling perfectly. The dragon had spent millennia believing she was broken, that her inability to connect was her own fault. Learning that others had simply never been able to hear her had changed everything. "You are not broken," Valithra told Maya in waves of gentle emotion. "You are just speaking a language no one else knows yet. Keep speaking. Someone will learn to hear you." Maya returned to her colony a different person. She started a support group for isolated kids, young people who felt like they did not belong. She taught them about the dragon who had been alone for 12,000 years and had never stopped hoping. Ben Porter was an old man with a white beard and eyes that had seen almost a century of human history. He had been a soldier once, then a farmer, then a grandfather. Now he was simply someone who wanted to meet the most remarkable being in the universe before his time ran out. His conversation with Valithra was short but powerful. He sent her the feeling of a life well lived, of seasons turning and children growing, and the deep satisfaction of having done good in the world. She sent back wonder, because she had never experienced such a brief and beautiful existence. Her kind lived for millions of years. They saw civilizations rise and fall, but they never knew the intensity of a life that had to fit everything meaningful into a single century. "You burn so bright," Valithra told him, "like stars that live fast and shine with all their heart. We watched you from so far away and never understood. Now I know. You feel so deeply because you have so little time. And that is not a weakness. That is the most precious gift in the universe." Ben smiled when he took off the interface. "She says we're the lucky ones," he told Lily. "Can you imagine? A creature older than human civilization calling us lucky." Years passed. Then decades. Valithra became part of human culture in a way no one had expected. Children grew up hearing stories about the dragon who had been alone until humans found her. Artists painted her image on walls and canvases across 100 worlds. Musicians wrote songs about the first conversation, the moment when two species finally learned to speak. The Galactic Council watched with disapproval. They did not understand humans. They did not understand why this small, short-lived species kept doing impossible things. They had expected humanity to grow cold and logical as they advanced, to leave behind their messy emotions and become sensible like everyone else. But humans refused to change. They kept crying at sad movies. They kept laughing at silly jokes. They kept falling in love and breaking their hearts and getting up to try again. And they kept visiting the dragon in the Vega system, kept adding their voices to the song that now echoed across the stars. Valithra lived for another 300 years. She spent those years surrounded by friends, by humans who came from every corner of their growing civilization to talk with her. She told them stories about galaxies being born. She shared memories of her people, of the Dracane who had faded away so long ago. And she listened to their stories in return. These brief, bright creatures who had done what no other species in history had managed. They had heard her. They had chosen to hear her. And they had refused to let her be alone. When the end finally came, Valithra was not afraid. She was surrounded by the great-grandchildren of her first friends, humans who had grown up knowing her, loving her, carrying her in their hearts. They sang to her as she closed her ancient eyes for the last time, sending waves of love and gratitude and the promise that she would never be forgotten. The last Dracane died as she had lived for the past 3 centuries, wrapped in connection, held by hearts that had crossed the universe to find her. She was not alone. She was loved. And somewhere among the stars, the song continues, because that is what humans do. They reach across the darkness. They refuse to let anyone stay alone. They connect, and they care, and they never stop believing that even the most impossible barriers can be crossed. It is messy. It is illogical. It is beautifully, wonderfully human. And it changed the universe forever.